Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Welcome to our weekly A11y Chats where the conversations are always raw and real about living with a disability. Um, have you heard the word suffering used when talking about disability?
And then there's also the I am so sorry that you have whatever disability you have, or just even the plain I'm sorry when you disclose your disability.
Yeah.
So
So today we'll be discussing why language matters and unpacking these stigmas that are perpetuated by such language. And feel free to chime in on the chat if you are following us on social media. We are also on Clubhouse today, so if you want to join us on Clubhouse and chime in, uh, yes, please do so.
all right, so let's get this party started. My name is Mariela Paulino. My audio description, I am currently wearing a black t-shirt that says the future is wait, what does it say? The future is accessible at Project Hearing in white letters. I am a Hispanic woman with shoulder length, black hair. I am wearing headphones and I am in my office, which is a white background with a whole bunch of very colorful paintings and my backpack on the side. So, a bit about Project Hearing. Project Hearing is an advocacy media company that makes the future inclusive to people with hearing disabilities by hosting trainings and sharing best practices for accessibility, including workshops, events, and other events just like the one we're hosting today. Adriana, who are you as you travel through the world?
Yes, thank you. So I am Adriana Malazzi, founder of Puffin Innovation. I am a white woman with short, dark hair with some silvers in it, a purple headdress cover. I'm in a power wheelchair, and I'm wearing a light whitish colored shirt with some gold colored sparkly, I don't know, but I don't think you can see it in the video. And that is me. Puffin is creating hands-free access to consumer electronics for people with limited mobility in their upper extremities. So let's get right into it. Mariella, you want to share some of the guidelines for today?
Absolutely. So, the first ground rule for today is to remember that the opinions that we share during these conversations are that they are our opinion. This is a space where we're trying to be unfiltered. We want this to be a safe space for us, but we also want it to be a safe space for you. So use this as a learning space. Feel free to chime in with your question. Raise your hand, put it in the comments, and let's have a conversation.
Yes, and we may show your comment or question on screen, and if you do not wish to be shown on screen, for those of you typing your questions in the chat, please use hashtag no screen and we will not share that on the video.
We'll also love to know where you are joining us from. So make sure that you drop it in the chat somewhere. We have had some people join us from all over, and it's really, really interesting to know that these conversations can reach so many. So if you feel comfortable, go ahead, let us know where you're joining us from in the chat. And also, if you feel so inclined, let us know, why is this topic interesting to you? Is this something that you've experienced personally, or are you just here because you want to be a better ally and a more educated colleague, friend, what have you?
Yes, and we also have an anonymous form to submit your questions anonymously, and it's bit.ly/ A11y Chats form. So you can also submit your questions that way anonymously. And yeah, so let's get into it. Mariella, let's get right into it. What I mean, why do we want to talk about this today?
Girl, I want to talk about the problem. I want us to start talking about the problem and the reason why this is even a conversation that we need to have in 2022. For me, I think that very often when people can when we disclose that we have a disability for the first time, one of the first thing we're doing is we're disclosing. We are sharing that part of ourselves, and the initial reaction that people often have when we have these conversations is "I'm sorry," and I think it's very interesting because when we hear that, what we're really hearing is "I'm sorry that you're disabled." And I think that that really highlights the underlying assumptions that people generally have about what we can and cannot do. They are already making all of these assumptions and about our lives, about the quality of our lives, and feeling sorry for that, not knowing anything about our lives at all. And it really highlights and recognizes our own assumptions as a society about disability as being very, very limited.
Yes, yes. I agree. And it's also that pity. You can see it in their faces, right? Um, when you meet someone, you can often see uh, that they just feel so horrible and they think that your life must be so miserable and filled with just despair. I mean, obviously, as people with disabilities, living with a disability, there are ups and downs, just as any other person's life. Um, and we do have some unique challenges that other people who do not have a disability might not face. Um, but we are human beings, and as such, we have our ups and downs just like anyone else. And disability is part of the human condition. It's part of what makes our society different. It's a difference that's just like any other difference. Part of a person's difference, such as having red hair or blonde hair or curly
Can you
hair or straight hair.
can you imagine if you just had brown eyes, just happen to have brown eyes, and then people are like, "Oh my God, you have brown eyes. I'm so sorry." It's the same thing. And it's just even the idea that the wording of that is like, why even why does it have to be a negative thing? Like, why not just acknowledge, as you just said, that that is a part of the human experience? People have been having disabilities for as long as we've been human. Like, it is not this new concept where people with disabilities just came out in the 21st century. People with disabilities have existed for as long as we have existed. And this is actually something we talked about earlier last week, which is the idea of us all being temporarily able bodied. As we age, our bodies will disintegrate. Our bodies will break down. If we're lucky enough to get to old age, there will be things that no longer work the way that they are working now. We will struggle with walking. We will struggle with hearing. Our vision will get worse. These are all real things that happen to the human body. All of us, at some point in time, if we're lucky enough to get to old age, will experience the deterioration of our bodies, and there is nothing wrong with that. So it's really important to take away those assumptions. And I think it really goes back into something we also talked about briefly last week, which is the idea of the medical model of disability. Adriana, you want to talk about what the medical model of disability is?
Yes. I yes. So people often thinking that you're sick. It's a sickness. And while some disabilities may lead to different health issues, the disability itself is not an illness or a sickness. Um, I have cerebral palsy, and it's from birth, and it's not ever gonna go away. Um, and I've I've been on a paratransit ride where there are people who are temporarily or situationally disabled. They were injured, and so they are temporarily using the transportation to go to their medical appointments, etc. And so they just happen to be on the ride with me. And let's say I'm getting off or they're getting off the ride, and they'll be like, "Oh, it was nice chatting with you if we were talking," and then they'd be like, "I hope you feel better." And I look at them and I kind of giggle and I say to them, "Well, I'm really okay. I'm not sick. I just have a disability." "Oh, well, I hope you feel better anyway." And I'm like, "But I'm not sick." Uh, this is CP. This doesn't go away. This is just who I am, and I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. Um, the other one of my biggest pet peeves is the random stranger that will come up to you or say, like, "Oh, can I pray for you?" Well, why do you have to come up to me and say that? First of all, it's if you want to pray for someone, you do it quietly. It doesn't have to be acknowledged by anyone else. Um, and also, if anyone else went into their personal space, especially those that like want to lay hands over you or anything like that, um, it's just they would not accept any of that. They would not accept some random stranger off the street invading their space. It's just not appropriate at all. What are your thoughts on this, Mariela?
One of the things that I try to do in those situations is that I try to assume best intentions. Because otherwise, I'm going to throw hands, Adriana. I have to assume best intentions. And so when those things happen, I they tend to happen typically, when you're in a line at the supermarket, just buying bread, minding your business. Uh, and I try to use those opportunities as an opportunity to educate. I try to make people understand, as you said, I'm not sick. There's nothing wrong with me. I mean, if you want to pray for me, go ahead and pray for $1 million. I could certainly use $1 million, get myself a villa in Italy or something. Um, and I recognize that often I am the very first person with a disability that this individual has met. I am the first person with a magnet on their head. And the privilege that I have to be able to talk with that person, to hear them, to engage in dialogue, to tell them why what they're doing is not appropriate. It may be that they are from a different culture where this is what they do. Um, And I use that as an opportunity to educate them about hearing disabilities. I use this as an opportunity to educate them about cochlear implants, about personal space, and how these things are not okay. And I think also you touched earlier on the medical model of disability and how it really focuses on fixing the individual through prayer, through you know, fixing the human body. And I think it's also very important to recognize as a society, we very often look as the individual that needs fixing. We think that if this body, which has whatever challenges it may have, is fixed, is absolved or whatever malady, then I will be a part of society. And I think it's very, very important to recognize the history behind that language and the history behind those assumptions. Because the disability movement actually started taking like center stage in the 90s. In the 90s, that is 30 something years ago. That is when we finally started looking at disability from the away from the medical model of looking at the individual being the problem, and we started looking at disability as a social construct. People with disabilities are not able to do things because sidewalks don't have ramps. Ramps actually came through at the end of World War II.
Yeah.
So before that, people in wheelchairs couldn't get from point A to point B. Like you literally were not able to leave your house. And so it's really, really important to look at the history of disability in society. It is very recently, very, very recently, that we have started looking at disability from the social model perspective, looking at the challenges in the world around us and how they limit the individual, as opposed to the historical medical model of disability, where we are looking at at the individual. It's your fault that your body is not working, and that is why you have a disability. We need to fix you so that you can be a part of society. So we are still dealing with that mentality in 2022, and the history and the implications of us talking about disability in that way from the medical model, which I think is really, really important. I also want us to go ahead and talk a little bit about the cultural and religious aspects around disability. So, if we also look at disability from that cultural and religious aspect and the historical aspect, for a very long time in our history, we think that it's like a million years ago, in the last century, but we're talking like as early as like just in the 90s, in the 80s, in the 70s. uh, People with disabilities were seen as if they had acquired their disability as a result of a curse, because God punishes you, or because you did something so horrible and you're being punished by God, the universe, those universal forces. And so that aspect of disability history still remains to this day. It's still like that underlying topic around conversations around disability, where this individual with divine power, it gave you your disability, made you blind. This oracle made you deaf because you are a bad person. And so that is still something that exists in our society, not as prominently as it was in the past, but it's still in the underlying conversation that happens around disability.
Yeah, and I think also the media does not portray or does not help with this, right? Of getting rid of those false narratives of disability. Especially with uh, being a punishment for wrongdoing, or let's say someone who's blind is the oh wise one, is the oracle. I mean, how many times have you seen that in film, in on TV, in movies, in stories? It's always the blind person, and figuratively saying, because they don't have their physical vision, their this other third eye has been open, and so that is why they're able to uh, see the futures, or just predict things, or whatever it is that the oracle is able to do, and they have these divine powers as a result of that. So I think that's another part of it, is that our culture as a whole, through storytelling, uh, via print or word, voice, or film, is just, it keeps perpetuating those stigmas. So yes, and we do have some comments that I just wanted to bring up before we move on. And we have Alan who's on. So these are comments in our clubhouse chat, and we had Alan who said he was interested in this topic and was looking forward to the discussion. We have Marie who is joining us from Roanoke, Virginia. Marie, my aunt is from Roanoke, Virginia, and it was her birthday yesterday. And she says, I'm here because I love talking about this topic, and I don't suffer with disability. I suffer because of the ableist society. Yes. Thank you, Marie. Thank you. And thank you to all who are joining us right now. Um, yes, so I just wanted to highlight some of those things. And Marie also said, I wonder if there's a model that is based on the social model of disability, but acknowledges that some disabilities will exist no matter how accessible the world becomes. That's very interesting. Yeah, that is something to really think about.
I actually love this comment from Marie. Hi, Marie. Love what you're doing on Instagram. Your favorite holiday is coming up right around the corner. So that's actually something I think is so interesting, because there is this concept known as universal design. There is an author by the name of Regina Gilbert. I think I have her book somewhere behind me. And the concept of universal design, and this is something I've talked with Regina a bit about, the concept of universal design is so interesting, because the concept of universal design is the belief that universal design is being able to create a fully accessible society that is universally accessible for everyone. But the reality is that it doesn't matter how accessible you try to make something, there will always be someone that unfortunately will be excluded, either because of budget constraints, either because of a lack of infrastructure, either because of a lack of the technology that is needed to make something truly accessible hasn't been created yet. And so, one of the things that I really, really believe is we always must do the best we can where we are with what we have. And once you know better, you do better. And so the idea of universal design for me means, how can I make something as accessible as possible, trying to include the largest number of people possible, and then iterate so that as I am continuously improving, as more people enter into that space. Adriana and I hosted an Instagram live yesterday. Instagram is not closed caption. What can we do? We can create a StreamYard that links to a Google Meet to facilitate the closed captioning to provide the closed caption functionality. That is something we can do. But how do we make uh, an Instagram live accessible to somebody that's deafblind? We don't really know, but that's something we can definitely try to figure out and then just make those small changes to slowly improve whatever it is that we're doing. So, my belief with that stuff is always you do the best you can with what you have where you are and just continuously iterating a product so that you can include more and more people into the conversation, into the event, into whatever you're hosting to try to make it as accessible as possible. But as I always like to say, Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to be able to create universal design on your first go. Thoughts on that, Adriana?
Um, yes. So, I mean, I really don't have much to add to that because you pretty much covered it all, and I agree. There are technologies obviously out there that have not been discovered, created, invented, etc. And I envision a future as technology evolves where I think we will be really close to having a very, very, very accessible world. And hopefully, we won't be needing to talk about how inaccessible the world is anymore at some point. Um, we do have a raised hand, Mariella. Do we want to invite someone to chime in at this moment?
Um, let's go over the very last point
Okay.
that we have for the problem, and then Alan will come right back to you.
All
So
right.
the very last topic we want to talk about in terms of the problem in the way we discuss disability is really, excuse me, is really the importance of us educating ourselves and our allies on problematic phrases and perceptions. There are phrases like suffering from a disability. And then there are other QC expressions like differently abled and special needs that really undermine the disability. It is a refusal, a blatant refusal to acknowledge the disability itself. And when we don't talk about the challenge, when we don't talk about a problem, that also prevents us from talking about the solutions. It is very important for us to remind everyone listening disability is not a bad word. You have to remind people of this. I am not quote unquote differently able. I am not special needs. We all have special needs. Everybody has some sort of special needs. Call the disability a disability because there is nothing wrong with the word disability. It is a part of the human experience. So those problematic phrases and perceptions, they do not exist in the disability conversation. Anything you want to add to that, Adriana?
Yeah, it's just funny to see people squirm and trying to avoid that word disability. Again, because I think culturally, in the media, socially, it's always been this thing like, oh no, we're acknowledging something horrible and bad, so let's avoid saying the actual word. When in fact it's the opposite. You're just perpetuating a negative stigma towards the word disability, and disability is a culture as well. We have disability culture, and we're proud of it, and we should be able to be proud of that. And so it's really important for people to understand that by not using the word, by avoiding to use the word, um, you're just negating the existence of a culture and of a group of people that anyone can become a part of at any point in their lives. As we said, people who currently do not have a disability are temporarily able. Because you can have a disability at any point in your life, especially as people are aging. So I just wanted to add that. But I would love to bring Alan up to bring up his point that he wrote in the chat and for him to be
I'm
able to.
I'm going to go ahead and invite him to speak. Alan, I hope you're ready. I'm bringing you up on the stage.
Great.
Alrighty. Let's see. Alan is now a speaker. Hi, Alan. So if you're talking, you will need to unmute yourself. It
It,
is the button on the lower right-hand corner of your phone.
it says he's unmuted, but I can't hear him. So I don't know what's happening. Can you hear him, Mario? It says Alan is unmuted and I can't hear him. Can anyone else hear Alan? Is it my club deck? That is, oh, you do hear. We
Yeah.
cannot hear Alan, which is weird. We're having some technical difficulties.
We've got a few more people that want to come up on the stage. So we have Homie Beluga. I'm
All right,
going to let him come up. I think.
let's see if we can hear. I don't know.
Hello there.
It is very faint for some reason, and I don't know how to fix the volume on my club deck. And I really apologize. We're still figuring out how to do multiple streams. Um, it is not your side. We cannot, for some reason, Club Deck is not amplifying the voices. Like,
Hold on, Adriana. Alan, can you speak? Everett, you want to say something on the stage?
I heard him very faint. I heard him very faintly. It's something to do with Club Deck and a setting that. Let me see. Oh, I figured it out.
All right.
All right, I figured it out. Give me 1 second, Alan.
All right, so Alan, while
Okay.
Adriana figures this out, I'm going to just make a very quick shout out to remind everybody about the A11y conference we have coming up on November 1st through the 3rd. You can find more information by going to A11yconference.com. It is a 3-day conference. We are going to be having speakers from all over the world talk about their experiences, their stories, their expertise. One of the things that we would love to see more of is more disability conference that are done by and for people with disabilities. We have the deadline coming up for speakers. Marie, I'm looking at you. Everybody else that's listening in today, I want to let you guys know about the A11y conference coming up on November 1st through the 3rd. Adriana and I put this conference together because so many conferences around disability are being done by people without disabilities who have no relationship to disability, have no disabilities themselves, and we want to be able to put a conference for us by us. So if you are interested in being a speaker, if you've never spoken before, this is going to be a really great opportunity for you to share your story and your expertise with the world. Sign up by going to A11yconference.com. All right, Adriana,
Okay.
that show has been made. Are we good to go on the club
Yes,
set?
yes. I fixed.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. And I understand, having used Club Deck, what this is about, and it is very frustrating. Um, first of all, on your conference, great idea. And you're absolutely right. Most conferences, with the exception in the blindness space, at least, with the exception of the two consumer conferences, were always done as a profit-making venture. And for people in the space of selling technology, it was a place to advertise. And I think while that's a useful thing, I think there is a lot of value to a conference that doesn't have necessarily a profit motive, but a different motive. So congratulations on that.
Mhm.
Um, Suffering is just a part of the human condition. And I really like the early discussion about the religious model. I never thought about the religious model and the medical model having something in common, but actually, I think they really do when you put it in this sense, because in both cases, they are diagnosing it as a condition to fix rather than a reality of life. And I think in the medical model, that makes some sense because that's kind of what they do. But in the religious model, it's really antithetical to the purpose of religion, because part of the purpose, I think, of religion is to help people deal with human suffering. Thoughts on that?
Woo! I love that. That was really, really interesting. I also think that one of the things that people don't recognize, one thing I think people don't recognize in the religious model is that there are some people that see suffering in disability as part of kind of like you have to suffer to what was that? Oh,
I didn't say,
yeah, like some people see the suffering around disability as something that is a part of your story or a part of your history. Um, and so it's really, really interesting that you say that. I never really explored the religious model as part of the disability conversation.
well, it might be a really interesting. I hadn't thought about it prior to your bringing it up and putting it in the same discussion as the medical model, but it might be kind of interesting at some point, and maybe I should work on this, to point out how that is entirely theologically wrong. Um, it is inconsistent with theology, but much of modern religion is inconsistent with theology, particularly in the political space. We won't go there right now. But I do think in the political space, one of the places we really should talk about is quality of life versus quantity of life.
Mhm.
Because, Medicare was a wonderful thing in the 1960s when it came. But you know how Eisenhower talked about the industrial complex, the complex for creating weapons, the military industrial complex. I think we have a medical industrial complex today that is too focused on longevity and not focused enough on quality of life. So quantity to me is not the issue. The issue is quality.
Yes, that. Yes,
You,
yes.
I have
That
a
is.
theory.
Go
I have a
ahead.
theory that the what is it? My parents' generation is going to be the generation that officially makes accessibility mainstream. Because you're going to have over the next few years, you're going to have an entire generation of baby boomers that are now becoming disabled, that are losing their eyesight. Their eyesight is getting worse, that are struggling with hearing, that are struggling with walking. And let me tell you, baby boomers are very vocal. When
Mm.
they don't like something, you know. And not only do you know, but things get fixed really quickly. So, one of the things that I am expecting to see happen over the next few years as those baby boomers enter into retirement, they want to do fun things like they want to go to the theater, and then suddenly they're finding out that they're struggling to follow along. We're going to see those requests for accommodations just skyrocket. And then the accessibility conversation, that conversation we were having earlier about universal design, is really going to come up, and you're going to start seeing those small changes that are really going to make society accessible. Adriana, you want to add to that?
Interesting point, because I think for people like Adriana and I don't know about you, but I really in blindness, which is my situation. But I suspect the same thing is true for Adriana. Um, and anyone who has a severe congenital disability, the dissonance that we experience uh, between our experience and the able-bodied population is so much a part of our life uh, condition and the way we respond that I think it's very different for people who become disabled later in life. And to me,
Mm.
I'm always trying to get rid of that dissonance. And, I don't like the social friction that comes as a part of my disability, and so I have all of these tricks, I mean, I recognize that I make people uncomfortable. So, I'm always trying to use humor or anything I can to grease the skids to reduce that dissonance. But I don't think people who lose a sense or an ability have that same dissonance because their experience of disability and the dissonance they feel with it kind of are matched. Does that
Mm.
make any sense?
Yes, yes, it does. I've actually uh, have expressed that before myself, and it makes total sense. Uh, and and I think that's also um well, to Mariella's point is that it becomes a reality for more people now, uh, and for those people, it's like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do now? I still need to do all these things for myself, and how am I gonna do them because I can't see or hear or use my legs as well as I did or my hands as well as I did, and I think that's why, to Mariella's point, is that it will really make accessibility more mainstream, uh, because it becomes more real to those people.
Yeah, I like that, and I agree with that. The last thing I wanted to say before I hop off stage here, and I'm just going to stay, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I like Mariella's point also about how new this technology is. The Bible and all of the ancient lore about disability and everything existed in a time prior to technology. And I think Mariella understood good about this, at least in the blindness space. Braille is only about 180 years old. Guide dogs less than 100 years old. They didn't start teaching people mobility, those relative to using canes, until after World War II. So, I think it just is it's still such a new discipline, and it's hard for us to see that because we only see today. But this really is very new technology, and I think you're right that Mariella's point that that'll force it the disabilities of the current generation, and I'm more your parents' age than you guys' age, but will stimulate the development of universal design. So thank you for the chance to speak on this, a great topic. Not a fan of pity at all, um, but I do think we need, as disabled people, and I think it's easier for those of us who are congenital, but we need to just develop a very, very, very thick skin and
Uh-huh.
realize that we control our destiny regardless of what people say. We don't have to take it in. If someone wants to say, I'm going to pray for you because they want to feel superior or they want to take control, we don't have to allow it. So I really do think that a piece of the answer is to become very thick skinned about it and recognize that we are the only ones that can control our destiny. So with
Uh-huh.
that, I will shut up. Thank you.
Um,
Thank you, and
Alan, thank you so much for that. And I just want to remind you we have the A11y conference happening in November. I would absolutely love to see you submit a topic in there because I feel like you have so much to talk about on so many different topics. It's been amazing follow. Like I'm going to follow you right now. I see we have Marie who has been like hanging in the background for a minute, but Marie, what are your thoughts? What do you want to share with our audience for today?
Hi, thanks for letting me come up here and talk. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes, loud and clear.
Perfect. And just for accessibility, my picture on Clubhouse, I am a pale skinned woman with dark hair pulled back up. Oh, Michelle's here. Hi, friend. I am wearing a black dress that Michelle styled. She took this picture. She's such an amazing photographer in person. I'm sitting on a bunch of rainbow set stairs. And yeah, I love this conversation so much. Really, what I wanted to kind of like add to a little bit was the whole like the religious model and just the pity and suffering and all of that, because it's like I was born with my disability and I've never known anything else. And so for me, one of the reasons why I hid it so long and that why I never like disclosed was because I hated the looks of pity. I don't need your effing pity. I don't need it at all. This is my life. This is who I've always been. I've always had tumors. I'm born with tumors. I'll die with tumors. Tumors are my life. Just how it is. It always confused me to be be told that someone was going to pray for me, because I'm like, okay, well, in theory, your God supposedly made me this way for a reason. So why are you praying for me not to be this way? If they, in theory, made me this way for a reason. But I understand now that I'm older, that was the only thing that people knew to say. That like they felt so uncomfortable with disability in general that it's just the generic response that makes them feel like they respond as well. But if they disability, there's nothing to really be ashamed of. The ableist society should really feel the shame. Whoever made it so that disability is hidden and that people feel like they can't be disabled and that we shouldn't be disabled, that's where the shame should be. I don't pity myself, I pity ableists. People who don't understand that there is so much more to life than your productivity. There is so much more to life than doing what everyone else is doing and doing it in that exact way that they are doing it. It's like as a disabled soul, I pity the able-bodied neurotypical person who just knows ableism and doesn't go out of their way to just learn from other perspectives. Really, I feel like the shame should come in ignorance. And when, for me, finding my disability pride was just the most beautiful thing. Like, I'm here talking to you guys and like making friends around the world and just being able to like be authentically myself in all of my glory. I'll never understand that now that I have been able to unsubscribe from ableism. I'll never understand why people will put shame on that. And so yeah, I just wanted to add that to it, and I really appreciate the space. And I'm looking to apply for the Ally Conference right now, so I'm very excited for everything. Thank you, Adriana and Mariella, and Alan. I enjoyed listening to you speak as well. This is Marie, and I'm done speaking.
This is Adriana. Thank you, Marie, for that. And um, we just need to wrap up on our live stream, but we can continue talking on here on Clubhouse. So if you give us a minute to wrap up our live stream, Mariella and thank you all for joining us today. We just want to remind everyone that our next week's topic is prepping for a doctor's visit. It's next Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to be talking about healthcare experiences as people with disabilities. We're going to be sharing some best practices for people with disabilities, their parents, guardians, and support systems to ensure that access to healthcare is as accessible and inclusive as possible. Mariella.
So do not miss next Friday's conversation. Adriana and I have had our own offline conversations about our own experiences in healthcare, how I navigate my healthcare as a person who has a hearing disability. Adriana will also be sharing some of her best practices, some of the things that we try to do to be proactive in managing our healthcare. I want to remind all of you, those of you just listening right now for the first time, the A11y conference is a 3-day conference that is going to celebrate the past, the present, and the future of disability. We're going to be exploring tools, best practices, and the technology that benefits the disability community and their allies. So I need you all to go online to A11y conference .com. A11y is a numerism that stands for accessibility. We want to hear your stories, your voices, your experiences, your best practices, your favorite technology at this conference that is going to be for us and by us. So go online at A11y conference. There's also a super quick survey that we encourage you to take to let us know what you like, what you didn't like about this conference. So you can go to bit.ly/A11y Chats survey if you feel so called to give us some feedback. And then finally, make sure that you follow us. So you can follow me at Project Hearing. I am on Instagram primarily. I am coming back from a very, very long social media break, and there's so many conversations that we need to have. So follow me at Project Hearing. Follow Adriana at Adriana Malosi. So that is Adriana with one N, two L's, and two Z's. And make sure that you follow the A11y conference on social media as well.
Yes,
And
so
really,
thank you everyone for joining. We will see you all next week. Uh, have a
at
great
11
Yep.
Eastern.
Bye everyone.
Bye.